Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive into an absolutely fascinating 9-year saga that recently played out in family court. It's this wild story packed with grocery store romances, some incredibly complex medical defenses, and heavy legal obligations that, honestly, everyone needs to understand. We're looking at the case of Battle versus Sidwell, which perfectly illustrates how biology, the law, and matters of the heart can completely collide in ways you would never expect. So, right at the center of this case is a massive question that brought an engaged couple to a complete standstill right in the middle of a courtroom. It's a real showdown of medical science versus biological reality. Think about it. Can a man who firmly, genuinely believes he's medically incapable of conceiving, a guy who flat out testified that he felt he was shooting blanks, still end up being a biological father? This wasn't just some hypothetical medical debate we're talking about here. It was the exact real-life dilemma putting Miss Battle and Mr. Sidwell's lives on total pause. And the stakes? They literally couldn't have been higher for these two. Mr. Sidwell desperately needed solid proof that 2-year-old Timothy was his biological son before he was going to commit to marrying Miss Battle. He drew a super hard line in the sand, telling the court, if he's not my kid, then there's no marriage. On the flip side, you have Miss Battle, who actually brought this case to the court because being in this constant limbo was taking a huge mental toll on her. She loved him, but they were absolutely 100% stuck until this biological mystery was solved once and for all. Now, to understand exactly how they got to this intense standoff, we really need to look at how their rocky 9-year relationship unfolded. As you'll see on this timeline, it's a journey that kicks off with a totally unforgettable encounter over barbecue supplies, moves through some intense searching, hits a really bumpy patch of breakups, and eventually culminates in the birth of a child that marched them straight into a courtroom. Step 1 of that timeline plays out like a literal rom-com movie script. They met when Mr. Sidwell spotted Miss Battle in a grocery store. She was shopping for a big party, and as she testified, her basket was just loaded to the brim with ribs, chicken, and beef. Sidwell walks right up to her and starts teasing her about having a cart entirely full of meat with absolutely zero vegetables in sight. Without missing a beat, she fired back, telling him to come around to the barbecue and bring his grill. I mean, talk about an instant electric connection right there in the grocery aisle. But here is where the story takes a pretty wild turn. Sidwell leaves the grocery store and realizes, to his horror, he completely forgot to get her number. He actually drove his truck around the neighborhood looking for the fine little hot mama with the basket of meat, asking random people on the street if they'd seen her. No luck at all. But then, miraculously, 2 weeks later, he's giving a buddy a ride to the health department, and boom, there she is, just sitting in a chair. You know he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. He literally walked out, bought her a brand new cell phone right then and there, just so she could program his number into it. Now, that is dedication. With such an incredible, almost fated beginning, you kind of have to wonder, right? What went wrong? Well, eventually this casual, fun relationship turned serious, but it definitely wasn't smooth sailing. They dealt with temporary breakups, their relationship was described as rocky at best, and Miss Battle even relocated to Miami for a bit. Because of those gaps in their timeline, right around the window of conception, combined with some really deep physical suspicions, Mr. Sidwell developed some major doubts when baby Timothy was born. Adding a whole new layer to his doubts, they even had this hilarious, completely unscientific debate right there in the courtroom over genetics. Mr. Sidwell pointed out that little Timothy had what he called a jughead, while claiming he himself had a round head. While Miss Battle fiercely pushed back on this amateur genetics lesson, arguing that actually they both have thumb heads. It's definitely a funny moment, but it really highlights how people will desperately latch onto visual clues when they're harboring deep internal doubts. Despite those visual doubts about the baby's head shape, Sidwell's actions at the hospital were incredibly significant. He was right there for the birth. He signed the birth certificate, and he signed an acknowledgement of paternity. He testified later that he did this just to be supportive of Miss Battle. But he was harboring this quiet, incredibly risky assumption that if he found out later the kid wasn't his, he could just easily take his name off the paperwork. And listen up, because this is a crucial legal lesson for everyone watching. Signing a birth certificate and an acknowledgement of paternity legally establishes you as the legal father. Boom. Just like that, you are obligating yourself to 18 years of financial support, completely regardless of any biological doubts you might have. And petitioning the court to just erase your name later, Judge Lake made it crystal clear that there is absolutely no guarantee a court will ever allow it. It's a massive, life-altering legal commitment that should never be made just to be polite in the delivery room. Which brings us to Section 1, the medical defense, type 2 diabetes. See, Sidwell's primary defense wasn't actually about head shapes at all. It was rooted in a very severe reality that formed the actual core of his doubt. Mr. Sidwell testified incredibly candidly that his type 2 diabetes severely affected his sex drive and his ability to maintain an erection. It was impacting him so much that he described literally having to pray for a personal revival just to perform intimately. He genuinely truly believed that at 50 years old, his medical condition had rendered him completely sterile. To back this up, Dr. Jamila Gator provided some incredible expert medical testimony explaining that diabetes is essentially a triple threat to male fertility. The condition damages fine nerves and blood vessels, which directly restricts blood flow and leads straight to erectile dysfunction. So, from a strictly physiological standpoint, Mr. Sidwell wasn't making this up. His physical barriers to fathering a child were entirely real and medically documented. But Dr. Gator's ultimate conclusion was the absolute turning point of the whole case. She confirmed that yes, diabetes creates massive hurdles, but she had to clarify a harsh scientific truth. If the biological mechanics allow for physical penetration to occur, even rarely or with immense difficulty, conception is scientifically and absolutely possible. His condition made it incredibly difficult, sure, but it absolutely did not make it impossible. Armed with that scientific confirmation, Miss Battle remained fiercely confident. When they asked her about the possibility of Mr. Sidwell not being the father, she wasn't backing down for a single second. She practically joked that unless an immaculate conception occurred, unless God did the exact same thing to her that he did to Mary, this baby belonged to Mr. Sidwell. She never wavered. So with the medical facts thoroughly laid out by the doctor and the heavy legal realities established by the judge, all those debates over head shapes and diabetes just faded away. The whole courtroom braced for Judge Lake to finally open that envelope and reveal the undeniable scientific truth from the DNA diagnostics facility. And there it was. The DNA diagnostics confirmed exactly what Mrs. Battle had been claiming from the very beginning of this incredibly stressful 9-year journey. Despite his age, despite his severe type 2 diabetes, and despite his own profound internal doubts, Mr. Sidwell was definitively, scientifically proven to be the biological father of 2-year-old Timothy. And what happened next was just a truly emotional resolution. The second he heard the news, Mr. Sidwell didn't hesitate. Knowing for sure that Timothy was his son, he immediately asked Miss Battle to marry him right there in front of the judge and the entire courtroom. It was this beautiful, spontaneous realization that his intense courtroom prayers were indeed answered, just, in a slightly different way than he originally thought. This remarkable case proves that while biology and medicine definitely have their limits, the law usually doesn't. Getting down to the absolute facts cleared the path for a brand new family here, but it leaves us with a really critical question to ponder. Before you sign on the dotted line in a delivery room just to be supportive, are you truly prepared for an 18-year legal commitment, no matter what genetics ultimately say? Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible stories behind the gavel.